Chapter 236 is the finale of Satoru Gojo. Sukuna, still incarnated within Megumi Fushiguro, stands proud, smiling away his final goodbye until his next challenger approaches. But this timeline is already slightly different, and Kashimo Hajime isn't the only sorcerer approaching the eviscerated city that we call Shinjuku. Following is Kinji Akari, who immediately engages Urame, and he's trying to fulfill a promise by letting Kashimo 1v1 Sukuna. However, once trapped within the domain expansion, neither of them were free to take on the last opponent. Kenjaku enters the battlefield, and nearly immediately after revealing himself, re-engages with Kashimo. It becomes obvious that Kenjaku doesn't intend on fighting Sukuna, at least right now. Instead, Kenjaku offered Kashimo the same promise that he guaranteed him 400 years ago, except for himself. Kenjaku specifically says that he wants to be Sukuna's next opponent, and doubting the battle-hungry lightning god Kashimo provoked him into accepting his offer. Kenjaku and Kashimo have now entered a binding vow, and the simple conditions are that Kenjaku will not interfere with their fight as long as Kenjaku gets to fight the winner. Kenjaku's cursed spirits surround the area in complete secrecy and instantly make him aware of anyone who's entered the battlefield and their exact coordinates. Kenjaku leaves the battlefield, but not before recovering the body of Satoru Gojo, and here's where the story gets complicated. Just like Kenjaku taking over Gojo's body, you can go down there and take the subscribe button and hit like on the video because 99% of you guys just aren't subscribed. Kenjaku restoring this new body is, in short, very unlikely, at least given how short notice this seems. Nearly half of Geto's body was completely burnt by Yuta's pure love beam, yet Kenjaku didn't seem to have much trouble restoring that vessel. That's all allegedly, because, you know, we've never actually seen it. Kenjaku ended up taking Geto's body completely off screen, so it's really hard to use Geto as an example. Yuta Akotsu needed reverse curse technique on full blast with Shoko's help restoring the body and Rika's connection before becoming the next Satoru Gojo. He was literally fatally wounded by a dismantle just a couple minutes before this happened. Yuta being cut in two and literally turning into Half-Joe before attempting to take over Gojo's body and still being able to make up the difference in damage using the reverse curse technique should mean that this is possible? Maybe. I really don't know what the likelihood of any of this is. Kenjaku being able to restore Gojo's body enough to completely take over after Gojo was hit with the World Slash is something that we can't really say is likely. But on the other hand, considering that it's at very least possible, even if we are a little bit generous, let's make this video a bit more interesting. Kashimo and Sukuna's fight plays out just like the original timeline. Sukuna is quickly overwhelmed by Kashimo's mythical beast Amber and has been forced to enter his Heian era form. Sukuna, now wielding his cursed tool Kamitoke, quickly reassumes transformation into his Heian era body. His old vessel born perfectly for Jujutsu with 4 arms, 2 mouths, and probably about 300 pounds of pure muscle, but still comes with some drawbacks from his battle with Satoru Gojo. We'll talk more about that later. All the nerfs and stuff are kinda complicated. Kashimo is inevitably sliced down, and Jujutsu High abandons their first plan of attack. Kenjaku's presence is extremely unexpected, and by all accounts completely miscalculated. Sending both Yuji and Higuruma would be more problematic than anything else, considering the fact that Gojo is now on the battlefield, but in the form of Kenjaku, which is now their ultimate nightmare. Once realizing Kenjaku's true plan for evolution, Sukuna for the second time locks eyes with the Six Eyes. Everyone at Jujutsu High thinks that the end is inevitable, remembering Tengen's words about the prophecy with the Six Eyes appearing on the day of the merger, which is also now in Kenjaku's control. This doesn't just redefine the meaning of fate, but Kenjaku is now completely controlling the destiny of Tengen and the Six Eyes after he's already beaten the Star Plasma vessel Yuki Tsukumo. The boredom fades and adrenaline fuels both of these Heian era calamities, and with each of them wearing the faces of monsters who have traveled across time to reach this very moment. Neither of them are surprised, and instead both of them realize that the game is now changed. Nobody cares about Megumi or Jujutsu High, and this battle is purely for the lust of blood. Kenjaku and Sukuna now begin the fight for the title of the strongest, and this is where it also continues to get complicated. It's hard to argue Kenjaku would even hypothetically say that this whole thing is even possible. Besides that, the issue with controlling the Limitless also comes into play. It's fair to mention that before casting the Unlimited Hollow Purple, Gojo's body was Black Flash boosted before being cut down by the world-cutting slash. Kusakabe mentioned this exactly and made it clear that Gojo's Black Flashes means that his reverse curse technique output is also restored. With Kenjaku's brain obviously being the one plugged into the Six Eyes, that also means that his brain is obviously fresh and doesn't have the damage from Gojo's fight with Sukuna, so Unlimited Void should be back online just like it was for Yuta. Multiple domain expansions nearly completely fried Gojo's brain before, but with Yuta seemingly having no problem casting the domain expansion, Kenjaku probably can as well, but that depends on his ability ability to control the Limitless, which again just brings us back to square one. So how much control will Kenjaku have using this technique? Yuta, despite having the 6 eyes and previous sessions practicing taking over this body, still struggled with basic applications like blue and purple and didn't even attempt using a red. But at the same time, I do really have to acknowledge that this quote-unquote failure is pretty badly misrepresented. And hang on, just hear me out. Yuta in Gojo's body is very trash and doo-doo garbage, and he definitely is the worst 6-eye user in history besides the baby that got no-scope by Kenjaku. But Yuta never actually failed at casting these techniques, and his failure more came down to the strategy and the combat IQ perspective rather than technique casting. Just for example, Yuta tried using a blue right here in its attractive force against Sukuna, but casted the technique closer to himself in this Kamehameha-like position without properly accounting for how this could negatively impact his footing. Just like how Satoru Gojo used blue for its high-speed movement to reach Maharaga, Sukuna had done something similar but using the poorly casted and terribly positioned blue. Yuta could still perform hollow purple and even fire off this technique, but his failure was underestimating the amount of power that would be unleashed and completely destroy the barrier protecting and encasing the unlimited void. Yuta shouldn't be an example to argue that these techniques are difficult to activate, especially considering that he has the 6 eyes. It really just comes down to the fact that implementing these techniques in combat is very complicated. It's more like not knowing how to use your ultimate move in Marvel Rivals or Overwatch. You really need time to experiment and to figure out the exact setup and configuration that works to properly pull off an ultimate move. Searching through Gojo's memory bank will definitely take time, but even besides that, Kenjaku is full of general knowledge of the Limitless curse technique. Jogo and Hanami had an entire lecture preparing them for Shibuya in the takedown in B5. Even the smaller details like curse technique reversal outputting twice as much cursed energy as curse technique lapse, and even the technique's range of effect are things that are all factored in by Kenjaku. Even Blue's teleportation and high-speed movement aren't left out of the equation, and the smaller details like unlimited void not affecting those in direct physical contact with Gojo is something that I'm not really too sure how Kenjaku figured out. He wasn't inside the unlimited void, and it's not even something that Sukuna knew about before seeing this interaction through Yuji Itadori. Although it begins to make more sense when you remember that he not only has the memories from Suguru Geto, but his own experience fighting different 6-eye users throughout history. Kenjaku lost twice to be exact, and the exact strength of the 6-eye users are completely unknown and probably irrelevant considering that we don't even know if they had the Limitless curse technique. Although we do know that Kenjaku explored the archive searching for data on Yuki Tsukumo's curse technique. He didn't know that it was Star Rage and nearly everything was kept encrypted or just stored away. However, it's not too far-fetched to say that Kenjaku probably would have and has done the same for his sworn enemy and only real opposition being Satoru Gojo. Kenjaku probably discovered the manual that Gojo was referring to when taking down Toji Zenin. Innate techniques have the advantage of being passed down throughout generations, and with that, Gojo literally calls these tutorials how-to manuals. They're meant to teach the future generations about things that are already discovered by the elders and the older people who have already mastered these type of curse techniques. The disadvantage is that word gets out about the techniques because the manuals get leaked like it's some Playboy Cardi or JJK chapter 237. Considering Toji knew likely through these manuals about Infinity, Blue, and Red because he's from the Zenin clan, it's probably not reaching too far to say that Kenjaku, who is Noritoshi Kamo and the head of the Kamo clan, would also have access to that same leaked data unless it's already within the Jujutsu archives, which he's already checked. Using the Limitless curse technique efficiently seems to come down to two different things, but both of them come from knowledge. Gojo didn't know how to use the reverse curse technique whatsoever, and it's not that he wasn't good enough, but that he didn't know how to attempt using this power in the first place. Gojo is known and has even been shown to pull off techniques like Simple Domain Red and Hollow Purple on his first try, and has been stated, even if you don't want to take it super literally, to be able to do anything that he actually attempts. But you also have to remember that you can't really attempt something if you don't have the knowledge to attempt it in the first place. Gojo doesn't need practice to confidently cast Reversal Red even in high intense combat scenarios. The only difference is that before, he didn't even have the knowledge to pull off making a red in the first place. The same could be said about his Hollow Purple against Toji and pretty much anything Yuta attempted as well. Kenjaku shouldn't have that issue. Even aside from the general knowledge of almost every aspect of the Limitless curse technique, he's also fought along Gojo before. Not literally, but he has Geto's memories, and both of them would fight constantly alongside one another, and we've even seen them use their abilities in tandem with one another. I'm not saying he's gonna be the GOAT putting up like Kobe numbers on the board using the Limitless curse technique, but he's gonna be able to have it to some extent for sure. power. Now talking about Sukuna, bro got super cooked in that final round against Gojo, and he's still feeling some of the after effects against Kenjaku. His reverse curse technique is still slowed, and his output is still shot like the original timeline, and unless there's some black flash happening not once but twice, Sukuna's healing factor is virtually gone. Maharaga is the biggest asset lost going into this fight, and without adaptation, he's left with just the World Slash, which is still pretty powerful, except now not thinking that he's ever gonna need to depend that hard on this technique ever again. Fully forming the slash requires making the Malevolent-Shrine hand sign while chanting and aiming his fingers at the desired target. Not only is this the biggest and loudest way to tell your opponent, hey man, I got a giant slash coming your way, broski, but it makes things even more complicated. But I'll do the rest of the yapping during the actual fight. Both of them start scrapping, and they're just simply pushing the other's limits and pressuring them to see exactly where they're gonna crack. Kenjaku is the challenger, but the King of Curses has been dealing with challengers for hundreds of years. Sukuna thinks that his attitude is nothing new, but his ego and monstrosity is something that few have ever witnessed. Sukuna should be near his prime, back in his true form, with his power only lacking around his reverse curse technique. When Kenjaku begins landing heavy strikes, his body will slowly begin wearing down. It's crucial that you have some type of healing factor, especially in these high-level matchups. In the original timeline, Sukuna couldn't even heal back his hand after being striked with Higuruma's Executioner's Blade. Even if Sukuna isn't going to lose an entire arm, it doesn't change the fact that the rate of healing is extremely slow because the output is simply reduced. When it came to healing Sukuna's hand, it wasn't even anywhere near completion until he landed another Black Flash. That could restore his output using the reverse curse technique like what happened to Gojo, but it's not like he can call the sparks of black on command. This fight will probably look similar to the fight that we already saw in chapter 224 after Gojo fired his 200% hollow purple. Both Sukuna and Kenjaku have access to their curse techniques, but without Malevolent-Shrine, he needs to rely on using domain amplification, which for Gojo is easily countered. Neither Gojo and probably Kenjaku have issues temporarily shutting off the neutral Limitless. The opportunity for a counterattack is actually better than just sitting there playing turtle hiding behind the infinite barrier of space. When Sukuna and Kenjaku engage in hand-to-hand combat, it'll be harder to counter domain amplification with the King of Curses literally having 4 arms. The one major downside is that with amplification, Sukuna can't use his curse technique Shrine in any meaningful way against Kenjaku. Sukuna can still use amplification after having his brain completely fried by Unlimited Void. We've already seen it, and I figured I would just mention it for the guy who's gonna comment that
Sukuna can't use domain amplification because his brain is fried.
Right here, when you see the wheel turning black, that means that amplification's on. Sukuna does still have his curse tool Kamatoke, and this tool can cause blasts of electricity that are pretty similar to Kashimo's cursed energy trait, electricity. Now this is like plugging in my controller into his butt, but if Sukuna did manage to grab onto Kenjaku and then activate amplification and then activate a lightning strike while somehow avoiding the blast himself, then that could do some lethal damage, but it depends on several factors that I don't really know how to compare. Kenjaku knows that Sukuna doesn't have his domain expansion, and at this point he really doesn't have any reason to hold back, so this fight will immediately start with Infinite Void. If you don't think that Kenjaku has enough control of the Limitless to do something like this and he's just some type of idiot, that's also cool. It's not like he successfully casted Idol Transfiguration better than Mahito ever did on his first try and literally steals techniques for a living like it's his job on LinkedIn, but while totally not being sarcastic, if you think that, that's also cool, but for the sake of the video and wanting this to actually be interesting, I'm giving him the Limitless. Inside the Unlimited Void, Sukuna only has 2 real options: make physical contact with Kenjaku to neutralize the sure hit attack, or find some other countermeasure to this domain expansion. But this domain expansion is more than threatening for a couple reasons. All it takes is one moment for the victim to be instantly taken down, and the information flows into the caster's mind, which overwhelms the brain, inevitably leading to a complete shutdown. Sukuna is more than aware of this, and thinking on his feet, he quickly activates Hollow Wicker Basket. This anti-domain technique is the prototype of New Shadow style Simple Domain. These methods for countering domain expansion like Simple Domain and Hollow Wicker Basket, they're just not really effective against a real domain. Infinite Void is just as powerful in a clash as Malevolent-Shrine, and Gojo's Simple Domain was completely ripped away within seconds. Sukuna's use of this anti-domain countermeasure is unique, and that's because he's not limited to just 2 arms for incantations. Simple domains and hollow wicker baskets don't require that much energy to perform or maintain. However, the low output also means that they'll eventually fail, and they really just stall for time before eventually being hit with the domain expansion's imbued sure hit. However, Sukuna is able to maintain his output during and after activation because he continues maintaining the hand sign commonly used to activate this technique. It's pretty much just Sukuna constantly powering on the hollow wicker basket. This means that Sukuna can keep fighting without ever being overpowered by the domain expansion, and with Kenjaku more than likely not fully restoring the body considering that he's only been this vessel for the last couple minutes, both of these sorcerers are probably closer in power than you might think. Each of them have their advantages but oh so massive drawbacks. Sukuna's main concern is still infinity, and Kenjaku's 6 eyes allow him to continuously power both Unlimited Void and the neutral Limitless simultaneously. Without domain amplification, there's virtually nothing that could be done against infinity. Sukuna not having Malevolent-Shrine at all and Kenjaku having infinity heavily restricts his combat ability, but the same could be said about Kenjaku's current state in Gojo's body. Kenjaku will eventually move in to close the distance. With infinity, he can completely play offense without worrying about any defensive countermeasures. This fight really isn't that complicated, and it comes down to Sukuna finding himself pretty badly dispositioned without Malevolent-Shrine and the after effects from his fight with Gojo. Sukuna could find a way to activate Malevolent-Shrine like he does in the original timeline, but to be fair, he probably only was able to do that because he was awakened by the Black Flash. And that's exactly why the next part is going to be that much more interesting, because after cracking down the Unlimited Void, Sukuna is completely paralyzed and another domain shatters.